Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Raise Patient Financial Satisfaction, sponsored by ACI. I am Anuja Vaidya with Becker's Hospital Review. Hour for a question and answer session. You can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by typing them into your control panel in the space labeled Enter a Question for Staff and clicking Send. We are looking forward to hearing your questions. Today's session is being recorded and will be available a few days after the event. Additionally, in about a week following the webinar, we will be sending you a copy of the presentation to the email you used to register. ACI will also be attending the upcoming Becker's Hospital Review 4th Annual Health IT and Revenue Cycle Conference in Chicago from September 19th to the 22nd. If you would like to learn more and speak with a payment expert, please stop by booth number 805 or schedule time to meet during the show. We are pleased to welcome Terry Meyer from UC San Diego Health, Mark Archer from Noggintex, and Mahela Johnson from ACI to kick off today's webinar. Terry Meyer is currently the System Director, Patient Revenue Cycle at UC San Diego Health, providing leadership for the build and implementation of UCSDH's single billing office. Terry has worked exclusively in healthcare for 38 years, serving in multiple leadership roles as well as healthcare consulting. Prior to UCSDH, Terry spent 4 years as the Director, PFS, and Director, Professional Billing Organization for Stanford Healthcare, and the prior 12 years as the Director, Revenue Cycle Operations for Oregon Health and Science University. Mark Archer is a seasoned executive with deep and broad decision science, risk management, customer relationship management, and operations experience. Mr. Archer began his career with GE, where his career spanned numerous countries and multiple functions. He has worked extensively in Asia Pacific, serving as Asia Chief Risk Officer in Tokyo for GE Money, and as the Chief Operating Officer for Consumer Risk in Standard Chartered Bank Singapore. He has managed analytic and score modeling centers in China and India, and has also run a large collection operation in the US as Senior Vice President of Discover Financial Services, responsible for 2,500 plus personnel in 4 domestic call centers. Prior to co-founding Noggintex, he served as the CRO for Hire One, a leader with the college student banking and payments industry. Mark has worked as CFO and served on the board of a medical billing company and has provided consulting services to several fintech startups. Mahela Johnson serves as Director of Product Management at ACI Worldwide. In this role, Mahela leads product strategy for real-time payments and disbursements and drives innovation for billing and payment solutions serving healthcare payers and providers. Mahela has 16 years of product management experience in the financial services industry, including leadership roles at First Data, Western Union, and eBay. At this time, I will now turn the floor over to Terry to begin today's presentation.
All right, so I guess the next slide. It looks like our agenda today is for strategies to transform patient financial satisfaction, using technology to improve patient financial outcomes, and evaluate the patient financial experience and revenue cycle. Next slide. So strategies for transforming patient financial satisfaction. Next slide. So what were the challenges that UC San Diego billing and payment experience faced in satisfying our patients? When I first got here to UC San Diego, the billing was 2 separate departments, one for the hospital and one for the professional services. So our patients were receiving 2 patient statements. If they wanted to set up a payment plan, they had to set up 2 separate payment plans. They had to call 2 customer service departments to ask questions regarding their bills, as well as the debt collection policies on both the hospital and the technical portions differed in some aspects. On top of that, the hospital actually outsourced their customer service to a third party, whereas the professional customer service was handled in-house. This led to, different answers to the same questions that the patient was asking, and sometimes a lack of billing knowledge to support first call resolutions, as well as a lack of understanding on how to stratify self-pay follow-up. Next slide. So what created UC San Diego Health's urgency to act? It actually was my executive director when she was interviewing for employment here. She, in doing some research prior to her job interview, looking on social media and things, and she found that, gosh, it looked like patients were happy with the clinical care, but not so happy with the patient billing process. And she actually thought to herself, gosh, this is something that we can do something about. And then during her interview, she learned of, lots of complaints going up to the executive leadership, as well as San Diego has a patient advocacy department called We Listen, which were getting, a lot of calls unrelated to care, but directly related to billing. Next slide.
Terry, just one question there. Was there a specific driver or incident even that made this a must-do, as far as, at looking at all of these different, all the insight that she was gaining from the reviews? Was there anything that specifically sort of just called out that this is the time?
I think the revenue cycle department as a whole, they were restructuring it under one executive director, both the hospital side and the professional side. So I think it was an opportunity to, align not just customer service and the patient billing, but the leadership over one executive director. So that was, I think, the catalyst to looking at things, as well as I think they were trying to make the patient's financial experience a differentiating factor. We have, our competition, direct competition, like almost across our parking lot is Scripps and Sharp. So, with the clinical care, being the same, there's got to be something that differentiates yourself from the others to keep patients coming back.
Great, thank you so much for that. Was there, when you looked at those challenges that UCSD was facing, how were you able to sort of prioritize those changes? Is it really focused on, were you looking at primarily just patient satisfaction to create that differentiator with your direct competitors?
Yeah, that definitely was the priority of UC San Diego, was the patient experience. I think they do realize that, the billing component does have a great impact on, even if the clinical care is good, the last thing that they remember is, getting that bill and the struggle that they had in paying that bill at times.
Thank you again for that, Terry. So, if you wanted to share some of those solutions, we'd love to hear more about that.
Sure. I think that's the next slide, right? Oh, okay, that's it. We're on the solution side. So what we did was we implemented, we're an Epic shop, so we implemented the Epic single billing office. So this provided me a chance to look at the roles of the customer service reps and the organizational structure. Under the roles, we actually, in hiring for the staff, classified our job description. It's actually the highest leveled patient biller in the organization is on the customer service. So San Diego really got behind making sure that customer service was a priority. We hired, a lot of billing and collection knowledge workers, not so much just customer service. Again, looking at that first call resolution and knowing the patient's calls were regarding billing issues having the right knowledge of the person that's answering the phone to be able to answer the question was a priority for us. We looked at our policies and procedures, aligned them, looked at the reasons why patients were calling. When they call, we actually root cause why the patient is calling, and then we developed situation response guides. So then it didn't matter who the patient got on the phone, depending on the issue, they were going to get the same answer. We kind of phased out the outsourcing. We actually did retain them as an overflow because we wanted to make sure that we're able to meet a high standard of metrics with regards to our service level. And then we put a lot of time in developing our single patient statement. Enlisted the help of some of our patient advocacy groups that we have here at UCSD. So the patients really had a hand in building the statement. Our statement's really clean. It just has the information on there in which to elicit one response from the patient, and that's really to pay the bill. And we've, in this last year, our statements, our calls to our percentage of statements is about 4%, which I think is pretty good. So the calls are really coming in regarding billing issues, not so much patients not understanding the statement or having trouble reading it or deciphering what it says. We employed a few other techniques to kind of separate our follow-up strategies and our outreach to our patients with segmentation and presumptive charity, and then optimized our IVR solution so the patient has a good experience when they're dialing in. And then building out Epic, really had the staff that was going to be on the front line doing the work have a hand in building the system in which they were going to work in. Because again, it really is that the staff and the technology that all comes together to create the staff being satisfied as well. Because customer service can be challenging at times when customers are really passionate about why they owe a balance. So making sure that the system we employed is easy to use by our front and staff was really important to us as well. We built out an online presence with our MyChart. Patients can make their own payment plans within parameters. They can in-basket message us. We set up a email address so the patients can email us if they so choose. So kind of opened up all avenues to pay and then all lines of communication into customer service to make it as easy as possible.
That's an impressive endeavor. I got to say, I am impressed with all of the different facets that you guys approached. In the solutions that you initiated, was there one or two of those that were most impactful, from a patient or a consumer's perspective that you really think hit, and addressed, that patient satisfaction need?
Yeah, and I think it's actually the knowledge base of the staff that are answering the questions. I mean, one, the patient statement, again, very important because it's very simple, it's easy to understand. Patients know what they had and why they owe the balance. But those patients that do end up calling in, having the right person on the other end of the phone that can answer their phone call is, I think, really a turning point for us.
And using that same sort of question, looking at the internal staff, because you really did look at both, interaction points, if you will, the customer being the external and the internal customer, your staff. But was there one or two things that you did there that really was most impactful to your internal customers?
Oh, absolutely. I think having them part of the process, not only building the system, but when we were hiring their coworkers, I involved my staff in the interview process. I would interview them. My management team would interview them. Then they would actually interview with the staff that they would be working with. And it wasn't, we put our scores together, and it was a mutual agreement as to who was going to be part of this team. And again, so I asked my staff, gosh, can you see yourself working across the aisle with this person? As well as asking the interviewee, gosh, can you see yourself working across the aisle from, the group of people that just interviewed you? So just their total involvement. They did the onboarding. They did the shadowing. We had the new employee shadow with all of the staff. So then I got an idea of just making sure that the workflows were consistent. And, so they got a flavor of not being able to just, you kind of have a single out of one person to ask questions to, but this allowed them to be able to go to anybody to ask a question and get the same answer.
That's impressive. And so, just another question with regards to this being, it was obviously a large initiative, right, multifaceted. Did you have a single source that owned everything from a cross-functional perspective, or did you potentially use some partners to help support, managing this endeavor?
Yeah, it was myself and my team.
And how did you prepare your staff for some of these changes, even just your team? With regards to, did you develop a vision and sort of the mission around that vision and work there to develop out a strategic plan? If you could share a little more on that, would be great.
Oh, yeah, correct. It definitely a mission and vision again, and our overarching goal was patient financial experience, and then all the things that we employed underneath that we are going to tactics to accomplish that goal. Having a group of super users again in understanding the system, how it's built, what its functionality is. And then having their knowledge of, when the patient calls, what would be the easiest way to build this system? Because again, we only have so many people. I've got, 700 calls coming in per day. I've got 32 people on the floor. And our talk time is about 6.5 minutes. And, I need the system to be easy to use so they can put that note, who caused that call, answer the patient's question, take that payment. So there's lots of components in making it user-friendly, so the staff don't feel overwhelmed in just helping that patient.
Thank you so much for that insight, Terry. I really appreciate you sharing more. And so, just looking at sort of what the next slide would be, and then helping, transition with that, if you will. How did you guys build this business case?
I think a lot of it, the patients built it for us with their dissatisfaction of the billing process. Looking at controlling costs, again, it was, one patient statement instead of two, combining the collection agency. So there was also some cost savings in there.
And was there any unexpected, when you prepared the business case to support, again, the additional investment needed to make these changes and to get that buy-in, have there been any unexpected benefits from this endeavor?
Well, unexpected, I think, is just our performance. I think the level of customer service that we've been able to achieve. I think we went in, and even with our segmentation, with some idea of what we could accomplish, but what we've actually been able to accomplish has been a very unexpected achievement.
Excellent, excellent. And what changes are still in the making, if you will? How will you continue to build on to the benefits or the results you've seen so far?
We're going to continue to expand our omni-channel customer support. So we are getting ready to do a double upgrade on our Epic, which will enable us to do more from a mobile perspective. Looking to allow the patient to do it-yourself estimates via the MyChart, and apply for financial assistance or some of the features that when we go into our upgrade. I want to continue to support the first call resolution with greater knowledge and proficiency of my SBO customer service staff. There's 3 of them on Friday that are going to be the guinea pigs. They're going to take their test to be a certified revenue cycle representative. We're looking to employ some voice analytics, as well as looking at some AI to drive some of our workflows, in particular our segmentation. Instead of, some of it today is just arbitrarily segmenting in 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5, levels of propensity to pay. But we like to get more specific to that patient to know I need to call Mary Jones on the 5th of the month after she receives her statement, so we can deliver that very sophisticated patient experience. Again, leverage MyChart with the upgrade functionality, and we continue to review and optimize our workflows so we can handle more calls with less people, and then create a culture of employee-driven solutions by keeping engaged my SBO staff in their role and in the organization as a whole.
Thank you, Terry. I really appreciate that additional insight.
And I think that might be done for me.
But is there any, is there some additional insight that you wanted to share before we move on to the polling question?
I think, again, just trying to make the patient financial experience can be an overarching goal, not only just for the balance after it becomes self-pay, but engaging all other points of the revenue cycle, from scheduling and registration, actually PFS, because we all have a hand in building that patient experience. And it's just that, interconnectability with all the departments. It's, again, it's they say it's the sum of the pieces that make the whole. And if we could have the overarching goal for all the revenue cycle to be the patient financial experience, and have everybody participate.
Great. Then I think we're ready for the poll.
Fantastic. So we have our first audience poll here. The question is, what are among your healthcare challenges when it comes to billing and payment? Select all that apply. We'll wait for a few moments for the audience to poll, and I will go over the results once we have that. The options for the poll are: can't collect because patients can't afford to pay medical bills, too many manual processes and not enough automation, using old technology, unclear billing and processes, lack of price transparency. And we have our results here. 60% of the audience selected can't collect because patients can't afford to pay medical. 37% selected too many manual processes and not enough automation. 29% selected using old technology. 34% selected unclear billing and processes. And finally, 37% selected lack of price transparency.
This is Mark Archer. I'm going to be with you guys for the next couple of slides for the next session here. And I wanted to pick up a little bit about, what is the patient experience really like? And if you could just for a moment, just think about it for a second. The patient's really facing into a much larger medical bill every year. Deductibles are going up, premiums are going up, co-insurance, so on and so forth. So they're really paying a larger share of their own kind of medical bills. They don't really have a say sometimes in, what costs are incurred on their behalf and, how those costs get priced. Plus, there's kind of stories out there, some of them certainly not true, but about unreasonable billing and wrong billing and problems with collections and so on and so forth. And I guess maybe most importantly, they've been ill. So there's probably some kind of income interruption. Future might be a little cloudy, et cetera, et cetera. So, they're really not in a really good place. And then think about a little bit the box in the middle here, how we approach them. This is kind of the classic approach, and it's kind of simplified, but we certainly first off kind of do some little triage or segmentation by balance. There might be some other things going on there, and I agree that, I've kind of oversimplified this, and there's nuance to it, but the triage has also got need and some other things involved that we basically try and get them into large buckets. And then I call it dialing for dollar, but we send out multiple messages, same times, same kind of message over and over and over and over. And kind of the message that's received is, you're a debtor, pay up. So we're basically treating all of these patients the same, kind of more like a debtor and maybe less like an individual. And, it's kind of no wonder that kind of the providers kind of struggle a little bit with having to make that call or how to approach the patient. And the patient, it's kind of a little wonder here why they're kind of unresponsive. So, what I'm thinking here on this slide is basically pushing and prodding can result in, a perception that we'd all like to avoid. And, the perception of the provider being inflexible, disruptive, possibly disrespectful, et cetera, et cetera. So, what you end up with there is, patient happiness, not so great. Collection costs tend to go up because it gets harder and harder to actually get to the patient and get the money, and collection rates, maybe not so good. Next page. So I'd like to just think a little bit about what technology can do with this kind of sad situation to improve our outcomes. And maybe we should start by just looking at how we actually communicate with each other right now. There's really no big surprise here. It's the mobile phone and it's internet. Look at the graph on the left, the 18 to 29, the 30 to 49 internet usage, approaching 100%, 50 to 64, approaching 90%, 65-year-old, approaching 70% and climbing. And look at the mobile phone ownership and smartphone ownership. It's climbing. So I think it's kind of telling us that the way to really approach your patient and get them engaged is through the mobile phone and through the internet. Indeed, a lot of surveys are telling us by 2020, certainly not much later than that, individuals who want to manage or will be managing about 85% of all the relationship with an enterprise online. It's kind of just inevitable. That's kind of where we're going. So next page.
And Mark, do you think that digital engagement, whether it's internet through a website or a mobile device, is going to be a significant driver when it comes to not only the patient expectations, but also delivery of care, delivery of understanding of what they owe, how they owe. When you really look at the opportunity, the timing, it just right into your next slide. So maybe I'll be quiet for a second.
Thanks for the setup. So how are we doing in terms of meeting some of these expectations? And we have a couple of little factoids here for you that we wanted to share. I guess kind of unfortunately, most institutions aren't really meeting some of the basic expectations. There are some standout organizations. Don't get me wrong, but just in general, maybe we're falling a little short here. Only 13% accept mobile pay. 58% are still relying on paper statements. And, we're feeling the pain, right? Most institutions are really feeling the pain. 58% of them saying, hey, you know, revenue cycle around the patient, you know, it's a big priority for us. And 63% are also seeing an increase in patient responsibility just year over year, not, you know, just it's grown amazingly over the last 4 or 5. Just they're still feeling the pain currently, and it's still growing. Then you kind of think about a little bit on the right here, some of the patients, you know, expectations. I guess most striking on this is 65% of them say they would go somewhere else where they actually get it in terms of, you know, a much better payment experience. So, you know, 88% want to know their responsibility up front. They prefer to pay their bills online. You know, where you kind of got to ask the question yourself, where are we relative to their expectations, and how do we deal with them? Next page.
Mark, just one question on that slide. So,
sure.
You know, do you, based on, you know, 88% of those polled wanting to understand their responsibilities up front, do you think that they're also, once they understand their financial responsibility, are they willing to actually set up either pay or set up a payment plan even prior to service?
Yes, yes, and I think, you know, it's about transparency, and it's about, I think, Mihaela, it's kind of about control. I think they have some expectations, certainly in our kind of digital environment now, that they have some control over the experience. They know what's going on, and they're able to get engaged, and they're able to, you know, to deal with it. So, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes. Next page. So what we're suggesting here is kind of a more strategic and technology-driven patient engagement. I wanted to share with you kind of what the model looks like and what some of the results are. What we're talking about right here is built on 3 basic principles that I wanted to kind of get out first for you guys, the way we think about it. First of all, it's clarity. Using data to really understand the patient's situation, and using data so that the patient can really also understand the situation. And I think we touched about this a little bit earlier. A really clean, clear bill certainly helps a lot. I think the second big principle that we work around is really trying to treat every patient as an individual, not just treating them all the same, you know, over and over and over again. And then the third principle, and probably the biggest one, is really around empowerment. You know, letting them have control of the conversation, not necessarily the control of the outcome of the conversation, but certainly the control of the conversation. And I'll try and make that distinction a little bit clearer. The kind of model I'm talking about here, we can plug it in any place. We can plug it in anywhere in the patient revenue cycle. Up front, back end, doesn't matter. It's kind of plug and play. Let me talk a little bit about the model itself. On the left-hand side, the decision engine, the individual there with the little gears turning in their head. It's all about really understanding the patient. And the first thing we do is use a decision engine to really generate some attractive offers for engagement. And we have part of that decision engine also knows the best channel. And we use machine learning to kind of optimize and make sure that we're sending the right offer at the right time to the right channel, and that will get the patient to engage. Now, I'd like to make the distinction here. We're not trying to collect the bill, not necessarily. We're not trying to dun them. We're not trying to treat them like a debtor. We're getting them to engage. They engage through the self-service portal, hopefully, you know, very seamlessly, and that starts the process. And when they're in the portal, we're able to give them a cascade of offers, starting with what the best one we think fits their situation, and then the next best one, then the next best one. So we're really kind of get them involved, get them to make the decision of what works for them, what fits for them. And we also have the capability of bringing in other information if it's germane to the conversation. You know, what's going on in terms of their employment, so on and so forth. So the basic premise here is that these people want to be responsible. They want to pay their bill. They want to feel redeemed and grateful. They don't want to feel like they're not fulfilling their responsibilities. I don't think, there are some, but I don't think there's very many patients really who walk through your door who are determined that they're not going to pay something, they're not going to pay the fair amount. I just have to kind of make it easier for them, I think. So anyway, get the general idea of what we're trying to do. Get them through the phone into the portal, get them into the portal, get them to drive the conversation, get them to come off with an offer and take an offer and pay that will leave them feeling good about the whole transaction. And if we do that, if we can do that, we've accomplished our number one objective, which is really improving the whole financial experience for the patient. And it shows up in higher payment rates. Not only do the number of people pay, but the average amount that they pay also goes up. So that engagement pays off for you financially, but really the goal is patient-centered. Let me talk a little bit about, how we make that work. So underneath that decision engine is some analytics, some modeling, and they're pretty robust. Propensity to pay models, and there's a lot of them out there, but I think kind of the best case is one that's really built on your patient, not one that's built on the whole world, the world being US. They're built on a lot of other data. I mean, they're great, they work, they rank risk, but they're really not your patient. And I think there are opportunities there when you're doing the propensity to pay modeling off of your own patient base. You get much better discrimination of risk, and you get a much deeper understanding that translates back into how you build your processes and how you interact with the patient. Also, we need best channel models. What's the best time, best channel, whether it's email, voice, e-voice, SMS, whatever it is. And we need to, make sure that we know what offer is going to work. So kind of knowing how to stage the offers. And all that really should be supported by machine learning. So, we're not kind of just feeling our way through what the frontier is here in terms of response rates and payment and satisfaction. Machine learning can help us get to the frontier a lot faster. So those are the ideas in terms of how do we actually engage and get the patient to feel much better about the experience. On the right-hand side, just a little bit, some results. These are just 60-day-old invoices. They've been sitting around for a while. A couple of them had already been out to collection agencies before we pulled them back in our tests. And, we got pretty good results. No patient complaints. I will, you'll notice there's a little footnote there. There were some around billing, incorrect billing that did get straightened out, but, really no complaints about the process. As a matter of fact, the patients, I think, felt pretty good about it. Got a 33% payment lift. I think that speaks for itself. And operating cost savings were kind of dramatic. So I think
Mark,
go ahead, Manuela.
So I just wanted to ask a question about that result. How are you able to do that type of comparison, within your service? How do you, I guess I would think it's like a champion challenger type of, or A/B testing or something along those lines. Could you share just a little bit on how you guys do create the ability to compare results?
Yeah, absolutely. We use the champion challenger approach, or commonly known as A/B. We'll take a certain segment of the population that we'll identify randomly. We'll assign a random digit to them or isolate them randomly, and then we won't treat them. So we won't treat them with this financial kind of engagement strategy, and that's how we can kind of measure the lift one over the other. So it's a pretty robust analytic approach, and we can actually demonstrate the lift. The other thing that's great about A/B testing is it also allows us to learn faster what will work in a particular institution or a particular patient base. So maybe you want to test a different policy rule, or maybe you want to, do something a little bit more radical in terms of, say a reward structure, free concierge parking or something like that. I don't know, let your imagination go wild. That can get tested, and we can actually see what kind of lift we can generate by doing some different things, so that we can learn more, engage the customer, or engage the patient, get them to feel a little bit better about what's going on, and move forward.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah. Next page. So in summary, it's kind of hopefully becoming a little bit clearer that the patient engagement paradigm needs to change. It's kind of The old school is treat every patient the same, at least until it's time to take action. Set the repayment expectations and only act within strict policies. And, engagement, maybe means, okay, we'll get out an e-bill and we'll do some, basic payment portal stuff, and we'll get some text out and so on and so forth. And, but I would argue that maybe this is a little severe, but I would argue we're basically digitizing the existing processes, and we're not really getting to the heart of what the patient needs in terms of their financial engagement expectations. So that would bring forward, okay, what's the new school? Well, every patient's financial situation is unique. Let's understand that up front. Let's understand that early. And they really like the anonymity of the internet and the control. They want to control the conversation, and they expect to be able to, to use those tools. And whatever we do with technology, we just have to ensure that everything is really tied back to patient satisfaction. So the new school is let's try and get ahead of the customer expectation curve. Let's try and redefine ourselves a little bit, and reap the rewards of really paying attention to what the patient's trying to tell us. So thank you very much for your time. I certainly look forward to any questions you guys have, and I think I hand it back to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you so much. At this time, we have our second audience poll. The question is, what would you like to improve for a better patient financial experience? Once again, select all options that apply. We have 4 options. The first one is provide a seamless and unified experience, offer greater transparency, adding convenience using cutting-edge payment solutions, initiating patient payment plans, and collecting more. We'll take a few minutes here while the audience does the poll. Great. We have the result in 55% of the audience selected provide a seamless and unified experience, 48% selected offer greater transparency, 70% selected adding convenience using cutting-edge payment solutions, and 61% selected initiating patient payment plans and collecting more. At this time, I'd like to turn the floor over to Mahela.
Great. Thank you so much. It's a very interesting result we're seeing there, particularly with regards to adding convenience using cutting-edge payment solutions. That sort of leads right into where we're going with where are providers focusing their development efforts? What are they doing now? And so when we take a look at that based on a recent Ovum survey at Firm Healthcare Providers, we really see them focusing in 3 primary areas: real-time payments, clearing and settlement, digital engagement with patients using their mobile device, and personalization. And I think that really ties in well. That last one really ties in well with initiating patient payment plans and collecting more. When we look at well, first let's look at utilizing digital engagement through the mobile device. We see about 73% are optimizing their e-bill for the mobile device, as well as 68% are really working on what I call text-to-pay, or utilizing SMS text messaging to initiate payment activity. As Mark mentioned earlier, every patient situation is different, and providers are responding to this as 63% are really developing more of that automated personalized communication, as well as 70% are really working on providing targeted offers to patients based on that patient's unique financial situation. And last but not least, we see 90% of providers are focused on real-time payments, clearing and settlement. The benefits for providers are not only the ability to improve cash flow, but also potentially to improve customer experience by providing visibility into payment statuses in more near real time, which could potentially lead to reductions in operational costs associated with having to address patient payment inquiries. So, I think there's just some different opportunities there as they focus it particularly on real-time payments. And so let's look at some of the projections from real-time payments if we want to go ahead and move to the next slide. As you can see, real-time payments is a new payment method that is coming to the U.S. market. It's actually been available in other regions of the world up to 40 years ago, over the last 40 years. And so what I think is most interesting about this is that, if we look at the projected growth over the next 5 years, that compounded annual growth rate, it's at 100%. And so as we, as part of that, we see both this activity is for payment activities as well as disbursement activity. So, you as providers know that, yes, we all want the funds to come in, we all want to receive our payments, but there are times that we actually have to disperse funds as well. So that's an amazing growth rate we're going to see for real-time payments over the next 5 years. So moving forward, now's the time to really start gearing up for real-time payments. And if we want to go ahead and move to the next slide. As I mentioned before, real-time payments is projected to improve customer service with being able to provide that real-time clarity of payment status, as well as, 80% believe that there is a cost savings. Along with those cost savings associated with reducing patient inquiry costs, because real-time payments is a push payment rather than a pull payment. There is also certainty of funds associated with real-time payments, meaning that once the funds are in your account, it minimizes payment exceptions such as chargebacks and NSF returns, if you will. I can understand, looking at sort of the next target, I can understand that why some may believe that there is a case for real-time payments to replace cards. Consumers use different payment methods based on their financial situation. So it'll be really interesting to track the progress of, 70% believe that real-time payments will eventually replace the card, and how and when consumers ultimately move from the utilization of their card to real-time payments to pay their bills. And finally, just touching on this last one, I can understand why some may not believe the case for real-time payments, or it may believe it's weak at this point, roughly 5% of you. But I think with additional education and understanding of how they work and the benefits associated to real-time payments, I can easily see where we can, that 5% will go down quickly. Along with real-time payments, the other thing we wanted to call out is many providers are actually moving payment functionality to the cloud, and we'll see that on the next slide. Thank you. We see a significant provider activity in moving payments to the cloud. Based on an OVM survey, 75% will move some portion of their payments infrastructure to the cloud in the next 18 months. 75% believe that they will be able to have a lower cost and lower complexity of payments themselves, as well as 75% believe the cloud will help support flexibility in launching new products and services. But along with moving payments to the cloud, we are also seeing an increase in security measures. You want to go ahead and move to the next slide. In the past 12 months, it's based on the OVM survey, health providers have had some payment data stolen. And so with that, it's truly not surprising to see that many of them are responding to adding greater limits about how they transmit data, where data is being stored, as well as introducing, 65% are introducing new security frameworks. Along with, they're also placing greater access restrictions or monitoring, if you will, on patient access, or excuse me, on employee access to patient data. If we want to go ahead and move along to the next slide. These changes, they don't come, without increased cost. So it's not surprising that only 10% of providers are being able to lower costs of payment over the last year. But there are a number of opportunities that we've discussed today that I think can ultimately reduce costs. If you look at some of Terry's stats, 4% call volume with regards to just understanding the bill, as well as some of the insight that Mark shared about moving to that new school, the technology, looking at predictive analytics for propensity to pay, utilizing machine learning. I think there's a number of opportunities there that could be explored. And if you're interested, we would be happy to explore those opportunities with you. Go ahead and move to the next slide. And so just a couple of key takeaways, folks, as we're nearing the end. Patients want quick and effective services starting at the beginning of their case experiences. And this includes, accessibility to portals, electronic communication, mobile, estimations of, their out-of-pocket expenses. Again, really wanting to, 88%, as Mark shared with us, want to understand what they owe up front. And there's a potential that they would start paying or maybe even pay up front. And then, as Terry and Mark both called out, they want simplified billing that is really easy to understand what they owe, when they owe it, with flexible payment methods. And, through innovative technology such as predictive analytics and machine learning, providers can accelerate revenue cycle and cash flow by providing effective patient payment strategies, payment plans, as Mark called out, and tools that can be used as levers to help drive patient satisfaction, loyalty, and collections, while ultimately reducing the cost associated with financial counseling and operating costs. And I think now we're going to go to our last poll.
We have one last audience poll. The question is, when would you like to optimize your revenue cycle and accelerate cash flow? The options are immediately, at Beckel's conference, 1 month, 6 months. We'll take a moment to let our audience respond to the poll. We will now begin today's question and answer session. Please submit any questions you have by typing them into your control panel in the space labeled Enter a Question for Staff and clicking Send. We will try to get through as many questions as we have time for. Our first question is for Terry. The question is, can a patient initiate a payment plan with a check from a statement?
Correct. On our online portal, they can set their own payment plans. The parameters in which we employ, the payment has to be at least $50, and we don't extend payment plans more than 12 months. And then they can do auto pay as well with their bank account or credit card. They can set up, and then we'll automatically take that payment out when it becomes due.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Terry. Our next question is, patients can set up their own payment plans within parameters. What are those parameters? And they are doing this online, is that correct? This
Correct.
question is for any of our presenters who'd like to chime in.
Well, this is Mark. I'd like to maybe make an observation that the number of patients that the number of patients that pay you is directly correlated to what you're asking for. So if you want to set up a payment plan for $300, that's broken into 6 payments of $50, you might get 10% of the people that think that's really great. But if you gave them a $100 haircut and let them spread that over, $50 over 4 months, your response rate might go from 10% to 35%. something like that. Just an illustration or just an example. So, the premise of the question was, I thought, maybe I misunderstood it, but the premise of the question is that the options are just fixed. And I would argue that there's some real benefit to giving the patients the ability to actually, go outside of those kind of policy guidelines and see what you can get in terms of response rates and dollars. Be creative about it.
Fantastic. Would anyone else like to chime in on this question? Okay, great. I'll move on to the next audience question. This is for Terry specifically. What about a patient who is reviewing their EOB and seeing bill charges? Some of our bill charges can reach 100,000. What advice would you give on this?
Yeah, the SRG that we have on this is explaining to the patient that those bill charges are just our price, but what we charge the patient is after we take into account what we agree with the insurance company as our contract rate. That's really what we're charging the patient is our contract rate with their payer. Our price is just our price.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Terry. Our next audience question is, how do you determine the best channel for patient communication? Is this evaluated by the providers during a visit, and how often is this evaluated? Once again, this is for any of our presenters who would like to chime in.
This is Terry. When patients are registered in Epic, they can actually pick their preferred communication. And then we can report on that field out of our system to drive how we communicate with the patients. A lot of it that we use right now is just for patients that have disabilities. So we're not trying to call a patient that can't answer the phone and talk to us. They prefer to communicate via email. We use it in a limited scope right at the moment.
I see. Thank you so much. I would like to thank you all at this time for a great presentation and for sharing your thoughts today. We'd also like to thank our audience for participating in today's conference. As a reminder, ACI will be attending the upcoming Becker's Hospital Review 4th Annual Health IT and Revenue Cycle Conference in Chicago. If you're planning to attend, please stop by booth number 805 or schedule a time to meet with their payment expert during the show. That concludes today's webinar. Thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day.